Hi everyone, I'm Raeedah. I'm a Barnard College junior.
And I'm Jessica, a sophomore at Columbia Engineering. Today, as the current and former graphics editors of the Columbia Daily Spectator, we'll be sharing our experience in student data viz and visual journalism.
Awesome. So yeah, we're going to start with a brief introduction to our organization. Then we'll trace through the evolution of our section graphics, some of the data viz work that we've put out as an organization, and then we'll discuss the broader terms of why student data viz matters, and hopefully we'll finish up with some ideas on how to bridge this gap between student newsrooms and professional data viz practitioners like you, and we can take questions at the end. So first off, obligatory introduction to our parent organization, the Columbia Daily Spectator. So yeah, Columbia Daily Spectator is an independent student newspaper and nonprofit covering Columbia University and our surrounding community. So that includes Morningside Heights and West Harlem, and our journalism sections include a lot. So we have admin, city news, arts and entertainment, sports, illustrations, photo, video, our long form magazine, The Eye, its sister podcast, The Ear, and of course, graphics.
Yeah, so altogether, we are a team of 200 plus reporters, illustrators, product designers, developers, and more. So all of us are also undergraduate students at Columbia, balancing the work that we do for the student paper with our already hectic lives.
Yes.
So now we're going to go through a brief history of Spec graphics. Next slide. So as you might have noticed in our logo, Spectator has been around since 1877. Graphics, however, is a very, very new section, which started in 2016 as part of design. So design was the combination of illustrations and graphics. And if that distinction seems a bit odd or unclear, it's because it really was.
So here you see some of the early graphics work back in 2016. It was pretty graphic design heavy, pretty infographic-y. I think these graphics would have been supplements to like news or service journalism. And while they do pack in a lot of information, as you can see in one kind of chart, they definitely wouldn't have been standalone content.
Yeah, and to further demonstrate the ambiguity between graphics and illustrations back in 2016 at Spec, here's one of a series of Columbia-themed Valentine's thumbnails that were published under graphics. And we find it really funny, but maybe that's just because we're college students. Let's move on from that now.
Okay, so here we have two different graphics. One of them is from 2016 design. The other is from 2019, also then called design. So both of them show endowment returns, and you'll probably notice some changes design-wise over the years. Content-wise, though, they're the same. They're both endowment charts. And yeah, it goes to show that over the years, our graphics have definitely become a lot more professional, kind of mimicking the sort of industry graphics you'd see from places like the New York Times, from Bloomberg, from Washington Post. And I think really at this point, we weren't looking to kind of our peer student papers for inspiration in our design choices specifically. We were definitely looking upwards at the graphic gods for that inspiration. So shout out to Amanda Cox if you're watching.
Yeah, so 2019 was definitely a pretty formative year in that during that year, the skill set of our pretty small section shifted to be much more coding heavy. So we had students in our section who knew different, skills such as D3, R, Python, QGIS, Mapbox, React, and scrollytelling. And that definitely shifted the way that we approached our graphics and the way that we approached our stories and data analysis. So even on the stories that didn't have an interactive component, such as this story about the linguistics major, you can see how we shifted towards a much greater focus on prolonging the user experience, scrolling through it rather than trying to kind of like throw all the information out at once in just like a single frame.
Okay, so 2020 was a big year for graphics. Yeah, we definitely went through a lot of big changes during 2020. I think specifically though, there was a huge focus on just more nuanced data reporting and reporting in general. And this was definitely bolstered by Spec's focus, like the newsroom in general, their focus on analysis pieces, whereas other newsrooms were definitely focusing a lot more on features.
Yeah, so for example, For example, we have here yet another story about the Columbia University endowment, but instead of just looking at the return on endowment, the story related the way universities maintain their endowments to the socioeconomic diversity of the student body. So we thus decided to take a much more nuanced approach to looking at the university financial data, as well as different ways to compare across our peer institutions.
So of course, this was also a semester where a lot of students were sent home due to the coronavirus pandemic, and amidst the panic and disruption, one way we definitely grounded ourselves was by experimenting with various tools and tackling larger stories.
So for example, we scraped data from Lionshare, which is the job recruitment platform open to Columbia students, to create this bubble chart in a story about job loss amidst the pandemic.
And yeah, with this story, the graphics here, we were showing systemic healthcare inaccessibility due to racial disparity. And so this one was a little bit more complex. We had data that was given to us by the IRS, but it was broken down by zip codes. And we wanted to make it a little bit more human, and more grounded in like the people itself. So what we did was match neighborhoods to the zip codes using ACS, or American Community Survey, data, and kind of just wanted to make it more representative of the demographics and showcasing that sort of inaccessibility to hospitals, inaccessibility and inequity within the healthcare system. And yeah.
Yeah, so in this next graph, which we like to colloquially call our COVID crown jewel, we contextualize the response of Ivy League and international universities to the coronavirus with the data on the COVID-19 cases that everyone was basically fixated on back in March when the pandemic first hit the US. So industry has always been able to kind of balance it all when it comes to data reporting, like with the reporting and then with the data and kind of separating it and then putting it together. But student organizations definitely have to allocate their resources wisely because we have less resources just in general. So as we move forward, Spectator Graphics is really committed to striking the balance between creative visuals, good reporting, and strong data analysis, whether in our independent pieces, or with the stories that we collaborate with other desks at Spec. Yeah, so another special thing about our COVID crown jewel is that through this story, we definitely went through a lot of very extensive and manual data collection. So really, this represents kind of like our shift towards collecting data and therefore localizing data for the Dataviz community at large. So we may not have the resources to make the most comprehensive data sets, but we do shift the focus through our ability to experiment and desire to push the boundaries of our own coverage. Other examples of this are in the link that I'm not sure we're going to show, but a restaurants table where we basically went around to different restaurants in the community, upwards of almost 200 different restaurants in the Morningside Heights community to basically update their data on whether or not they're open during this pandemic as students are returning to campus.
So another thing I think we definitely wanted to touch on here is just how student newsrooms can also inspire professional newsrooms and in general, like everyone of you guys who are watching this. So yeah, we wanted to talk about the growth in reporting in our peer desks and how that kind of solidified graphics role as a reporting section, but also how student newsrooms are data points for bigger newsrooms. So this is a story, like a brief screenshot of the story, and it's using 50A data that was published during the summer from ProPublica, BuzzFeed, Nightclue about officer misconduct, and specifically CCRB substantiated allegations against officers. So this article in particular used that sort of really popular data during the summer, but paired it with CapStat payroll data, which other organizations, other newsrooms weren't specifically looking at and building the story around. And through that, we were able to do our data analysis and our reporting, looking through different court documents. And we saw what our headline would tell you, which is more officers were promoted or paid more despite CCRB allegations. Yeah, like many student newsrooms, many professional newsrooms put out the story and used that data, built databases around this. But one in particular that I wanted to highlight was 2 months later after we put out this article, the New York Times also published one. A watchdog accused officers of serious misconduct, few were punished. And I saw that article and I just like DM'd the reporter who was on it, one of the reporters, Ashley Southall, and I was like, I saw your article and we also published one a while ago that was similar enough. And she actually told me that like our article, the Specs article, was used to pitch this one to her editor. And I wouldn't have known that had I not reached out to her. And I think it's really cool though. But I also think that it gives us the opportunity to touch on this a little bit later, Jessica will, about how more bidirectional the communication can be between students and professionals. So yeah, I think the final point I wanted to make here is that students are really grounded in the sort of day-to-day, and our coverage is so hyper-local, and the stories we choose to tell really, really represent the communities that we belong to. And national newsrooms, who are obviously bigger newsrooms in general, can look to that type of coverage and broaden its scope, its impact, and its delivery. And essentially, we are these sort of data points for bigger newsrooms.
Yeah, so we are aware that while we are undergrads, most of you here are probably not undergraduate students, so you might be wondering, what about me? Like, what should I do in this situation? Well, I'm so glad that you asked, so shameless plug here, but if you have the means and would like to support our newspaper and the journalism that we do, you can go to specpublishing.com/donate to donate to our work study program. There's another link in there where you can make like a general donation to the organization as a whole, but work study is the way that we help those in Spec cover part of their financial aid packages by working at Spec. It is key to helping support fellow Speckies and make our organization as equitable as possible. Next slide. But ultimately, it's not really about sharing the actual kind of physical wealth in terms of like money. It's really the most valuable thing that you could share is your knowledge. So we've been speaking in particular to our experience at our own school paper, but having a graphics or visual journalism section really is nothing new. I guess we tentatively make the claim that we're probably the only student newsroom with a graphics section like Spec Graphics. But the biggest reason why we are able to move beyond infographics and join the Dataviz community and create better data journalism was our exposure to the skills and shift towards the mindsets that different professionals have, professionals just like you. So whether it's through Twitter threads or links to tools in your portfolios or articles and how-to guides, Twitch streams, really anything to bridge the gap between students and other professionals, we believe is very important and we would like to advocate for. And we believe that there's really much to gain and learn from each other through these different connections. All right, so here's one last kind of cheesy Valentine's Day themed graphic from 5 years ago. We hope that you have a really wonderful and safe and warm rest of your winter. Thank you so much for coming.
And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Thank you. And I think right now, remote me is saying that we can take any questions to real Jessica and Raeedah. Yes, awesome. Thank you guys.